On behalf of all of you, I welcome Dr. Meenakshi Davar. She has got an MBA from University of Hull and she got her doctorate from the Governor of Haryana. She had started her career as executive trainee in the then NTPC through All India Selection Test. She continued in NTPC and then because of her talent, she was picked up by Power Grid. So she came to Power Grid and landed at the top echelon. But then she wanted to become the presidential appointee. So Honorable President of India appointed her as Director HR, as Functional Director in Power System Operation Corporation of India Limited. So out and out, she's an HR professional and I have the privilege to have worked in her team and she is holding the position of chairperson academics because she has seen best of the both worlds, the Oriental and the Occidental. At one point of time, there was a fierce competition and Power Grid wanted to win a certification from Stephen R. Covey Institute. Then the then CEO of the company decided that Dr. Meenakshi Davar is the only person who can possibly win this certification for Power Grid. So she came out with flying colors. She herself is a very resilient person and she had motivated me immensely. And again, we are in the team. So we were in the team, we are in the team. And besides our very busy schedule, I requested that you have to spend some time for participants because they should become effective in their life. And that is the ultimate goal of education. And as the famous author who had written the book, How to Win Friends and Impress People, Dale Carnegie, had written in his first book, which was not popular, The Art of Public Speaking, that the great aim of education is not knowledge but action. Dr. Meenakshi Davar is such an illustrious lady, scholar, administrator, and now grandma. But look at the zeal and fervor that all of us have got. So I don't want to waste the precious time of either Dr. Meenakshi Davar, the chairperson of academics of World University, but I also don't want to waste the time of the participants. So Dr. Meenakshi Davar, I am handing over the platform to you and I request my team to enable the machine so that in case Dr. Meenakshi Davar wants to share her slides, she could do that.
Yeah, I'd like to share my slides. Thank you so much, Dr. Pandey. It was a wonderful introduction. You've been very generous in your appreciation of me. So I have 1 hour with me. So I think we are here till 1:15. So let's start. I'll just start my presentation, right? Yeah. So the last 2 days you've been learning about the Andon for the HR industry 5.0 and beyond. And today's session is about effectiveness of personnel, resilience for effectiveness of personnel. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are.
Yeah, can you see my screen?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay. So let's start by that. Now, basically, when we talk of 5.0 industry 5.0, we are talking about the industrial revolutions. So what is an industrial revolution? So throughout the history, we as humans have been advancing as a society. whether it was through societal interactions, whether it was education, whether it was technology or anything. So what we have been doing is that we continue to improve how we live and we create new technology continuously. We've been making tasks which were, difficult to handle and were very time consuming. With the use of technology, what we have done now is that we have made them quick to complete, and we have also made them, easy to do. So with each passing generation, what is happening is that the advancements are becoming more and more impactful and more frequent. So we have come to refer to these advancements as the Industrial Revolution. So basically, it is, a new stage in the human advancement is what we call an industrial revolution. So each of the revolutions that we have gone through, they bring with it a specific quality or technology, which is the driving force behind the movements. And as we have progressed, what we have been seeing is that the gaps between the industrial revolutions are decreasing. So basically, we can define an industrial revolution as a period of development that shifts the way the society progresses. It throws the world into a new stage of human advancement. So far, we have had four major industrial revolutions. The fourth one is going on, but the fifth one is coming ahead, and that is what we have to be prepared for as HR people. So let's see what is industry. Let's first go through the four industrial revolutions. So the first industrial revolution started by the mechanization, which was sometime in the 18th century, and it was made possible by steam and water power. The second industrial revolution started around the 20th century, and that gave us new forms of energy like electricity, gas, oil, and it was marked by mass production and assembly lines and division of labor, right? The third industrial revolution is of the 1970s, with the emergence of nuclear energy, electronics, telecommunication, and digital. It came to be known as the digital revolution, and it was made by the use of computers. Now, currently, we are going through the fourth industrial revolution, which is basically the revolution, the Internet of Things, intelligence, artificial intelligence, advanced robotics, and this is what we are going through. Now, what are we predicting? We are predicting Industry 5.0. Now, Industry 5.0, basically, it is what has been happening is that 4.0 put new technologies and economic benefits at the forefront. The goal of Industry 5.0 is to integrate the humans with the technology and bring them close so that they start working more close to each other, and that will generate countless benefits. So what Industry 4.0 was doing was moving the humans slightly outside, while the Industry 5.0 wants to put them back. So according to the Future of Job reports, 65% of the children who are doing their primary education now will end up in careers that they have never really thought that they were going to be there. Half the jobs in the US have been automated. And the Davos 19, which is the World Economic Forum, their agenda, Davos 19 promoted the idea of blockchain, artificial intelligence, human, which will equal to magic. Basically, the idea of Industry 5.0 is to improve life by incorporating the goals of the United Nations Sustainable Development. So this is what we are going to do. This is what the prediction is, and this is what we have to be prepared for. So this is a small chart that I got, where Industry 4.0 currently focuses on machines, and 5.0 focuses on delivering the customer experience. So it brings the human experience becomes more important. Industry 4.0 was mass customization, Industry 5.0 is hyper customization, where the customization is made depending upon the individual. It's more personalized. Industry 4.0 was intelligent supply chain, and this is more 5.0 is responsive and a distributed supply chain. Again, personalized. Okay. And industry 4.0 was smart products. 5.0 moves towards experience activated interactive products, you know, and manpower was distanced from the factory in 4.0, and this is 5.0 is return of manpower to the factories. Now, for this we need to be prepared, and for this we need to have the personal effectiveness, which is the topic for today. Now, top 10 skills that are required, you know, in whether it is industry 4.0 or 5.0 or before that. The top 10 skills that experts have said are required are complex problem solving skills, critical thinking, creativity, people management, coordinating with others, emotional intelligence, judgment and decision making, service orientation, negotiation, and cognitive flexibility. Now, if you look at these skills, of course, you need to be aware of the technology and stuff like that, but a lot of them are to do with people and your own personal effectiveness. Now, let us look at what I'm going to tell you are basically certain principles, okay, that is going to help you, whether it is going to be industry 4.0 or 5.0 or 6.0. These principles are going to help you in any kind of a situation. I'm going to boil them down to certain principles that will help you become personally effective. Now, what are principles? Are you with me as a group?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. So yeah, so anytime you have a doubt or a question, just raise your hand so that I can address it. Okay, just unmute yourself and ask me anytime you feel like, right? So what is a principle? Now, look at me now.
Okay, ma'am. You can
If I,
continue.
yeah.
Last
So,
question as a
yeah.
right?
So what is the principle basically? See, I'm holding this pen, right? Now, if I leave my hand, what happens to the pen? It falls down, right? It doesn't start flying. Why does it fall down? It falls down because of the principle of gravity. So what we say is, what is the principle basically? A principle is the natural law or a fundamental truth. It is a natural law. It is universal and timeless. That means whether I drop the pen here or in the United States of America or in Africa, anywhere on the earth, it's going to fall down. It's not going to fly away, right? And it is timeless. Whether I drop it now or in the 18th century, whether I dropped it, it would have always fallen down. So principles are natural laws or fundamental truths. They are universal, they are timeless, and they produce predictable outcomes. So when I leave my hand, it will definitely fall down. It has a predictable outcome, and these outcomes are external to ourselves. Whether I wish it flies away or it settles down somewhere, it's not going to happen, right? It is external to me. It's going to follow the path, right? It operates with or without my understanding. Even a child knows that if he leaves without understanding the principle of gravity, a child knows that if he drops the glass, it's going to break. So it operates whether or not we understand it. But when we understand the principle, it becomes self-evident and enabling. So just like you have the principles of physics, whether it is gravity, whether it is thermodynamics, whether it is electricity, right? These principles are easy to understand because they've been taught to us. But there are certain principles in human behavior, in the way we are made, which we don't have any formal training about. And so we are not aware of them. So what I want to tell you are certain principles that are going to help you towards personal effectiveness. And these are fundamental truths that you're never going to fail if you follow them. Now let's look at what is personal effectiveness. Now, what is the difference between effectiveness and efficiency? Would anybody like to respond to that? Okay. Efficiency, I think you're a management people. Efficiency means whatever I put into it comes out. Input is equal to output. That is the efficiency. Whereas what is personal effectiveness? Effectiveness is where you consistently produce the best results. So let me give you the example of the story of a farmer who was very poor. But one day when he went out, he found a golden egg lying in the bushes. And he was very surprised. At first, he looked at it and he thought, just let me throw it away. But then he decided, said, let me at least he took it to the assayer. And there he found out that it was 24 karat gold. He was very surprised. He kept it with himself, right? Now, next day, he found another golden egg, and the third day another, and the fourth day another. And when he found that, he became rich beyond his expectations. But then he also became very greedy, and he wanted all the eggs, and he wanted them now. So what did he do? He killed the goose, right? And did he find any eggs over there? He didn't find any. Now, personal effectiveness, the goose here in the story is the production capability of a person. And the product is the golden egg. So what I'm trying to tell you is that you must have the capability, okay, to consistently produce a golden egg, right? What else do we learn from this? We learn that you got to balance short term with long term. You got to take time to invest in yourself. And whenever you produce the result, it has to be a golden egg. So effectiveness is defined as the PPC balance, that is the production, what is produced or the desired results, and the production capacity. So you don't want to have a goose that is you keep feeding and it keeps growing fatter and fatter and doesn't produce anything. At the same time, you don't want the goose to become so weak. So you've got to balance the two. So let's talk about how we are going to improve our personal effectiveness in such a manner that whatever output we give out has to be 24 karat gold, right? That is the meaning of personal effectiveness, and this is where we are moving towards. Now, these are the principles. I'm going to lay down certain principles of personal and professional effectiveness. The first principle that I want to talk about is sharpening the saw. Now, here I'd like to tell you, I'll go over these principles and then I'll talk to you about the details of each principle. So the first is sharpen the saw. The second one is that we are a product of our choices to our environment. We are not a product of our environment and upbringing. We are not a product of that. We are a product of the choices that we make towards our upbringing. The third principle that I want to tell you is always start an activity with the end in mind. Start every day with the way you want to end the day. The fourth one is actions must flow from what is important to you. So you have to decide what is important to you. The next is long-term relationships are possible only when you have a cooperative mindset, a win-win mentality, right? The next principle is that to influence a person, you need to get first influenced by him, and I'll explain the details to you. And trust and cooperation, the last but not the least, is trust and cooperation are necessary to develop a synergistic culture. Now let's take each one by one. The first principle that I'm talking about, and this is a universal truth, is the principle of sharpen the saw. Now, there was a management expert like you, another anecdote that I want to tell you, and he was walking through the woods and he saw a farm and he saw a woodcutter who was cutting down the trees. He seemed to be very tired and demotivated. And so he stopped and he asked him, he says, "How are you doing?" The woodcutter says, "Not doing too well. I used to cut 3 trees in a day and now I can only cut one. I'm not doing well." The management expert said, "Have you sharpened your saw?" The woodcutter says, "Dum dum, don't you see I'm so busy? Where do I have the time to sharpen my saw?" Have we been so busy driving that we forget to fill in gas in the car? What happens to the vehicle? What I want to tell you is that you need to sharpen the saw. You need to update yourself. You need to improve yourself. So there are 4 areas in which you need to sharpen the saw. First is the physical, your exercise, nutrition, stress management, looking after yourself. That is the physical aspect of sharpening the saw. The second is the mental aspect. Okay, you need to read, you need to write, you need to plan, you need to visualize things, and it doesn't take much time. On the physical side, I'd like to tell you that keep yourself abreast of the latest developments in food and nutrition. Number 2, spend half an hour a day, doing some form of physical exercise for yourself. Well, do it 4 days a week to start with. But if you do it 5 days a week, the effects are double. So take time to do that. As far as reading, I'd like to tell you, mental reading, just if you spend 10 minutes a day, you'll be able to read about, I'd say, 10 pages of a book, and in a month you can finish a 300-page book. What's the difference between me and my maidservant? The difference is that she cannot read and I will not read. So you need to keep reading. I want you to read about the latest developments that are happening in your field and otherwise also. Then comes the spiritual aspect. The spiritual aspect is basically value clarification. What are my goals? Where do I want to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, right? That is the spiritual aspect. And the social aspect is having good relationships with people who are close to you, with your friends, having a rich social life, people to talk to, whom you can trust, your colleagues. So these are the 4 areas in which you need to sharpen the saw. So what I want to tell you is that if you improve yourself in any one of these areas, 1% a day, 1% a day, in a week, you would have improved yourself 30%. So you need to take small steps, but start by learning about things that are important to your career and important to you, right? So this is the first thing that I want to tell you. First principle of sharpen the saw is always to be ahead of time, right? Now, come to the second one. The second principle that we are talking about is that we are a product of our choices to our environment and upbringing. We are not a product of our environment and upbringing. Now, what I want to tell you is that whenever there is a stimulus from outside, right? I say, "Hello, how are you?" Now, this is a stimulus that I am giving to you. Now, your response that comes to me, okay, there is a time gap between the stimulus and what comes from you. I want you to make use of this time gap, right? People who don't make use of this time gap, they immediately react, right? So this is called a reaction. Such people are reactive. Now, and then, like I say, "Hello, how are you?" You said, how does it concern you? The third person says, I mean, why did you react like that? Say, okay, I'm very grumpy in the morning. That's the way my grandparents and my parents were also very grumpy in the morning. So whenever anybody talks to me, that's the way I talk. Now, this is called a genetic determinism, that we behave in a certain way because our parents, grandparents, and their parents. So what I'm trying to say is that I reacted today here because 50 years ago, my grandparents were reacting like that. Or else you say that that's the way I was brought up. So that is called a psychic determination. My upbringing decides to me. Or else this pen is lying here and I walk out of the room, I pick up the pen and walk away. And somebody says, why did you do that? He said, well, everybody in the world is a thief. So what if I'm a thief? So that is called the our surroundings or the environmental determinism. Now, whether it is genetic or whether it is psychic, that is our upbringing, or whether it is environment determinism, it doesn't matter. These things, they only can influence you, but they cannot determine you. So what I want to tell you is that you need to use the gap between the stimulus and the response in such a manner that your response should end the conversation or the meeting or whatever it is in the way you want it to end. That is what is called taking responsibility. The ability to respond in a situation is called responsibility. That is called responsibility. The other thing is called a reactive behavior. So what do reactive people do? Reaction is very different from response. So reactive people, they feel that their condition is based upon the way they are feeling. They are unhappy people who feel victimized and immobilized by the weakness of others. Just because another person is short-tempered, you get upset. So it is his weakness that is upsetting you. Okay, and they blame other people, they blame circumstances, they blame everything for their own stagnant situation. This is where we don't have to be. Now let's look at the language that speaks. Language is very important because the way you speak affects your emotions. So language is very important. So when you make statements like, like there's nothing I can do, okay, that's just the way I am. He makes me so mad. Some people say that usko dekhte hi mera blood pressure chad jata hai. That means that person has so much power on you that when you saw him, your blood pressure went up or down. They won't allow that. I can't. If only things were better, I would have been happy. Now look at these kind of statements. There's nothing I can do. That's just the way I am. He makes me so mad. This is called reactive language, where you are reacting to the other person. What is the proactive language? Let's look at alternatives. Well, I can choose a different approach. I can control my own feelings. I can create an effective response. I choose, I prefer, I will. So next time you lose your temper, instead of saying that he made me lose my temper, start by saying I chose to lose my temper. Now, where do you feel that the power lies? It always lies in the productive language, and the responsibility also lies in the proactive language. So be careful of what you speak, right? Next time you decide to do something, don't say that he made me do that. Say I chose to do that, and see the difference in the way you behave and the way you feel. So what I want to tell you about this principle is that we are free to choose our actions, but we are not free to choose the consequences of their actions. So if you decide to talk badly to a person or not learn something, okay, you're choosing your action. So if you decided to fight with a person, the reaction would be that your equation with that person will not be so good, right? So these are called choices. So this is what I mean by saying, when I say that we are a product of our choices to our environment and our upbringing, we are not a product of our environment and upbringing, right? One more thing that I want to tell you is that you always work in your circle of concern, influence, right? Our circle of concern would be large. Okay, India is a big country. A lot of people are, there's too much of poverty. People are uneducated. There's a lot of corruption. All that is a circle of influence. What we need to do is we need to work in our circle of influence. That is, at least I can teach one person. At least I can be set an example by being non-corrupt, and I can do that. So this is called the circle of influence. So I give you an example that we used to go for a walk in the morning, and the park used to be really dirty. And everybody in the park would start grumbling. The municipality is so bad. Britishers came, they didn't allow us to progress, this, that, and the other. Okay. They would come and they would just keep grumbling and shouting about it. Now, in those days, there was a lady who used to come, and she was about 60 years old. At that time, we used to feel 60 is old. Now I don't feel that way. Yeah. So she would just come and she would just pick up the litter and put it in a bag and carry it out of the park and put it in the dustbin. So what was she doing? She was working in her circle of influence. And after a while, when people saw her working, then everybody started following that kind of behavior, right? And slowly the litter disappeared. So she became a transition figure by example. So what I want you to do is to replace the negative behaviors by showing your positive behavior wherever you are, right? This is what Mahatma Gandhi did. Okay, he solved the problem of the Ahmedabad mill workers, the indigo workers, the Harijans, and finally, when he gave the call for the salt march or the non-cooperation movement, slowly the entire country rose up. And finally, it brought the British Empire down to their knees. So it's important to work in your circle of influence to produce results rather than grumbling and complaining about the circle of. And one last point I want to tell you is that, okay, what do you do between the stimulus to get the response? What do you do in that gap? In that gap, what you got to do is that there are four unique human endowments that are only unique to human beings, and animals do not have these things: self-awareness, imagination, conscience, and independent will. So I can feel, I can stand apart and see how am I feeling. Am I feeling happy? Am I feeling sad? Am I feeling jealous, envious? I can decide upon that, right? I have an imagination. I know that if I fight with somebody who's senior to me or stronger than me, I'm going to lose, right? I have a conscience that tells me, my subconscious that tells me how to survive. And finally, I have an independent will. Okay, so we use these four unique human endowments and we arrive at a response. I'll give you a very, an example, which is a very funny kind of an example. My son, about 10, 12 years ago, maybe 14 years ago, had gone just after school. He had gone to Canada and he had gone there, to do his further studies in engineering. And you know how Indian mothers are concerned about their children. So I called him up one day and I said that, okay, what do you do in the evening? He said, "Main TV dekhta hu." So I said, now he had gone to Montreal, which is a French speaking area, and he doesn't know French. So I said, okay, so TV mein to sab French programs aate honge. He said, yes. I said, do you have a TV in your room? He said, no, I watch in the common room. So I said, okay, fine. So why don't you change the channel? Why don't you put a channel that you like? So he tells me that when you have people, when you have guys sitting around you who are taller than you and broader than you and well over 6 feet, you watch the programs that they watch. He knew that if he changed the channel, things wouldn't work out in his favor. So this is just a light example that I want to tell you how to respond to a situation. And this kind of a behavior is called a reactive behavior. Now let's come to the third principle. Start every day. Yes.
Madam, some of the participants want you to go back to the earlier slide.
Okay.
For a moment.
Okay, yeah, we are back here on this slide. Yeah.
Yeah. So now everybody is through with this, or you wanted to remain there for some time, or should I request Dr.
Yeah, so
Meenakshi?
these are the 4 unique human endowments, and we use these 4 things to decide how we want to respond to a situation. So this is what we do in the gap.
Thank you, ma'am.
Can I move on?
Yeah, please.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so what I want to tell you here is start an activity with a goal in mind. Mental creation precedes physical creation. Now, whenever you are going to start a building, right, what is the first thing that you do? You visualize it, you draw it on paper, and finally you arrive at making that building. You may make some changes later, but those are going to be expensive changes. So mental creation precedes physical creation. I want you to start every day with a vision of how you want the day to end. Okay, where am I going to be in 5 years, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, and then move towards that, so that you don't climb the ladder which is leaning against the wrong wall. A lot of people say that, okay, I became a manager, but I wanted to become a writer at the end of the career, they say. So we need to be clear is that what we want to do, and we can learn anything. We didn't grow up to be engineers. We were not born as engineers or HR professionals. Okay, we learned these things. So there is always time to learn. So this is the difference between leadership and management. So leadership is the first creation. It deals with direction, right? Second creation is management. It deals with the speed, logistics, and coordination. So doing the right things is leadership, and management is doing things right, right? So leadership is where is the ladder leaning against the right wall, and management is efficiency in climbing the ladder is management. So to give you an example, a leader is a person who climbs the tallest tree, surveys the jungle, and then he yells out, "Hey, we're in the wrong jungle." Whereas the busy and efficient managers are say, "Shut up, we are making progress." So what I want to tell you is that when you start an activity with the goal in mind, that is the habit of leadership, where you decide where you want to go, right? Now comes the management part of it, right? And the next principle, that is number 4, is that actions must flow from the activities which are important to attain the goal. What I want to tell you is that now comes management. So the earlier thing was leadership, where you decide where you want to go and what you want to do, and how you want to do it is the habit of management. So there are only 2 kinds of activities, right? One is that is what is important, and the other is what is urgent, right? So an activity is important if it leads you towards your vision or your goal, then it's important to you, right? It is based on your goals. And an activity is urgent if you or the environment feels that it needs to be done immediately. That is called an urgent activity. Now, so any kind of activity, say for example, if you're planning to wake up at 5 in the morning to go for a walk, right? That is your goal. And if you know you need 5 hours of sleep, if you don't get those 5 hours of sleep, you won't be able to get up in the morning. So at night, when your partner or your friend asks you to watch television, that watching television is not important to you, right? It's not important. It is an activity that is not to be done, right? Now, let us put these 2 kinds of activities and their opposites in a matrix. So right at the top, you have urgent, and its opposite is not urgent. And then you have important and not important, right? Now look at the first quadrant on your this thing. The first quadrant is urgent and important. right? So this is crisis, pressing problems, deadline driven projects, right? And look at the second one, that is not urgent, but it's important. Look at these. The first one is pressing problems. Look at these 3 P's: preparation, prevention, planning, value clarification, relationship building through recreation and empire. Now, if you had an exam 1 week from today and you were preparing, it was an activity that is important, but it wasn't urgent. But if you have an examination which is tomorrow and you're preparing tonight, it becomes urgent. If you were to go on a trip and you booked your ticket well in advance, say about week 10 days in advance, it was not urgent, but it was important, right? But if you're doing it just 2 hours before you're traveling, it becomes urgent and important. My point to you is that whenever you neglect quadrant 2, quadrant 1 becomes larger and larger and larger, right? So the idea is to do things in quadrant 2, which is not urgent but important, right? Now you come to quadrant 3. Now, proximate, pressing, remember these 3 P's: proximate, pressing, popular. Of course, there are interruptions, some phone calls, some mails, some reports, and some meetings. Now, these are not important to you, but they are urgent for someone else, right? But these kind of activities make you very popular. Chal chai peene chal, chal picture dekhne chal, where you're trying to become popular and pleasing other people, but they are not important to your own goals, right? And remember this P in the 4th quadrant: not urgent, not important. These are pleasant activities. Okay, hours and hours of watching television. Okay, if you have a mission when you watch television, suppose it is your goal that I want to watch 3 hours of television every day, then it becomes a quadrant 2 activity. But if you're mindlessly watching television, then it becomes a quadrant 4 activity. Now, management experts say, according to them, they say that you got to, if you spend, okay, I'll come to that later. Let me tell you one thing. The person who remains in quadrant 1 is basically the procrastinator, right? The person who remains in quadrant 2 spends most of his time in quadrant 2 is the prioritizer. Number 3 quadrant is the yes man, and number 4 is the slacker. This is the time management matrix that you have to keep in mind, right? So again, quadrant 1, which is the urgent and important quadrant, quadrant 1 is generally crisis management, right? Quadrant 2 shows a person that is attached to the mission. Quadrant 3 basically are distracted people, and quadrant 4 activities are basically time wasters. So what I want to tell you is that management experts say that you need to spend at least 60 to 70% of your time in quadrant 2, right? 20 to 25% if you spend in quadrant 1, it's okay. Something or the other will come up which is urgent, right? Now, quadrant 3, 15%, and quadrant 4 should be less than 5%. But the thumb rule is, okay, to draw a line, a horizontal line here with 1 and 2 on top and 3 and 4 below, and say yes to everything that is in quadrant 1 and 2, and just say no to everything that is in quadrant 3 and 4, right? So this is called the 4th generation of time management, is what I want to teach you. This is what is called. So you got to prioritize your activities and then work towards it, right? Now, it's very important to be able to say no smilingly, pleasantly, and non-apologetically. You would have noticed that a lot of people, when they say no, you kind of respect them. Whereas when others say no, you don't respect that no. You don't like it. Why is it like that? That is because when you have a burning yes within you, when you have a goal in front of you, I'm sorry, I cannot watch this movie because I need to go for a walk. And when you say no to that, okay, that is where the person accepts your no. So it's very important to have a goal, a burning yes, a burning desire inside of you to be able to say no to things that distract you and do not lead you towards your mission. So this is an important thing, learning to say no. And another thing that I want to tell you in management technique is the art of delegation. It's very important to delegate to people while you're working for your own personal effectiveness. So why? What is the difference between a producer and a manager? A producer, when he puts X input, the output is also X. Whereas a manager, when he put X input, the output that comes out is X plus something. So that is the difference between a producer and a manager. Now, a dentist, when he's working on your teeth, okay, when he's working on your teeth, when he opens the door for you, he adjusts the chair, he kind of puts the apron around you, and then he ties his own thing, he washes the tools, he takes the money. In that role, a dentist is a producer. Whereas if he keeps an assistant with him, then he becomes a manager, and probably he'll be able to see 20 patients in a day instead of 10. So that is the difference between. So when you delegate to others, you need to first show the desired results, that this is what I want, I'm expecting from you, right? That is the first thing. Second thing is, the spouse or the child, you know always think win-win. If you're in a competitive situation, think of win-lose. Now, there are 6 paradigms of human interaction that I want to tell you about. The first is a win-win, where I would like to gain in a conversation, and so the other, I would like also you to win in whatever you have come for. The other is win-lose, where I want to win and I want you to lose. Such kind of people are very aggressive in their interactions. Okay, the next form of interaction, the third one, is lose win. That is where you want to, how long can you sustain that kind of a relationship where you always lose and the other person wins? Okay, that is where people want to sacrifice all the time, and those relationships are not sustainable. The fourth is win, that I want to win, I don't care whether you lose or not. These relationships are also not sustainable. The only thing that is sustainable in the long term is either win-win or win-win or no deal. Win-win or no deal means let's agree to disagree for the time being. That is what it means. So you got to re-script your mind. You got to, first listen to what the other person has to say and then put your point across courageously. So it is the courageous thing. It is not being nice. It is the best way to get into interdependent relationships, and it is not always achievable. That is where you say it's no deal. It is a philosophy of human interaction that there's plenty over there for both of us, and it is not to manipulate another person, right? And it is based on a character, on your character. So this is called. Now I give you an example of what is a lose thinking and what is a win thinking. Win-win thinking. Now, if you're having a meeting and somebody disagrees with you, okay, so the loose thinking would be that, okay, how could she come to a conclusion like that? I'm going to stop her right now and ask her an important question that will bring us to the point. That is somebody who has a lose mentality, a lose win mentality, or a win lose mentality. A win-win thinking would be, I've never seen anybody interpret data like that. Can I understand this a little more? Now, when you've understood this thing, okay, you're only saying that you want to understand. You've still not agreed or disagreed with the person, but you've shown that you've respected the person and you want to understand that thing. Similarly, if somebody is shouting at you, the loose thinking would be, you're so bullheaded, this relationship will never last. Whereas the win-win thinking would be, he's trying to tell me something with so much of passion and so much, he's so agitated about it. Let me listen to it a little more closely, right? So this is what I want to tell you. Now, 2 things are very important in communication. One is courage and one is consideration. Courage is the ability to put forth your point, but consideration is the ability to listen and understand the other person. So if you see this diagram in front of you, if you're low on courage and low on consideration, neither can you put your point across, nor can you listen to the other person. That is where you have a lose-lose relationship with the other person, right? Now you come to the next quadrant. Okay, if you're low on courage but high on consideration, where you can listen to the other person but you're not able to put your point across, that is a lose-win interaction. Okay, where you always feel that you're sacrificing, and these relationships don't work in the long run. Now come to the top quadrant, where you're high on courage and low on consideration, where you can keep thinking about yourself but just don't want to listen to the other person. Such people are very aggressive, and their interactions are a win-lose interaction. And that is where aggressive interactions, these don't last. What lasts in the long run is where you have the ability to listen to the other person, understand the other person, but at the same time you have the courage to put your point across, and that is called assertive, being assertive in a win-win transaction. And this is the key to long-term relationships. Now, next thing what I was saying is that to influence a person, the principle is that to influence a person, you need to get first influenced by him. What I mean to say is that the most important throughout, the most important skill in life is communication. Since morning, we've been communicating with each other. You're listening, I'm talking, somebody's reading, somebody's writing. All these are communication techniques. And in schools, we have been taught, everybody was taught how to read, everybody was taught how to write, everybody was taught how to speak, but nobody taught us how to listen to the other person. And the most important skill in communication is listening, because only when you listen to the other person can you understand the other person. And only when you've understood the other person can you put your point across. This is what I mean to say. So I want to summarize in one thing, that the key to human influence is first to get influenced by the other person and then to influence. Because what air is to your physiology, okay, to breathing is to your physiology, acceptance and understanding is to psychology. So people feel accepted only when it is understood. And you would have noticed that 1 hour spent in understanding saves about 10, 15, or maybe 15 hours, 20 hours of problems, that are caused because of not understanding the other person, right? That is why understanding is important. Now, how do we listen? What I want to tell you is that either we agree or disagree. This is not called evaluate. This is not called listening. This is evaluating the other person. Or else we probe. That is, we ask questions, right? Or else we advise based on our own experiences. We advise a person. That is also not listening to the other person. Or we try to figure people out or interpret. All these are called autobiographical responses, and they are used only when the nature of communication is logical. Where the nature of communication is emotional, you need to understand by just listening to what the other person is saying, understand the feeling, the meaning, and the content quietly, and just repeat verbatim what the other person has said to understand. Now, there are various levels of communication where you have a high feeling of trust and a high feeling of cooperation. That kind of communication is the most important. Now, when you have low trust and low cooperation, you don't trust the other person and you don't even want to be in a win-win situation. You don't want to cooperate. So then you have a defensive kind of a communication with the other person where you have ifs and buts. If that happens, I'm not responsible. If this happens, you are not responsible. Okay, that is called a defensive communication. When you have middle level trust and middle level cooperation, right? That is a respectful communication where compromise is there. But the highest form of cooperation that results in synergy, that is ek aur ek 11, 1 plus 1 is 11, that is synergy, right? That is where you have a high level of trust and a high level of the feeling of cooperation. That is where you have a win-win interaction. So this trust and openness is required to have a synergistic culture in any organization or in any family or anywhere you are, right? So high trust produces solutions better than those which are proposed earlier. And we need to continue to be in communication until we arrive at a situation which everybody feels good about. That is what is the meaning of synergistic communication. And last but not the least is that we need to value differences between people. At the first level, we just tolerate that people are different. At the next level, we accept, can't help it, God has made us different. At the third level, we value, but it's important in organizations and in families to celebrate that all of us are different. But what is important is that what we do is that we kind of accept the physical differences between people. Somebody's tall, somebody's short, somebody has black hair, somebody has blonde hair, somebody's dark skinned, somebody's fair skinned. We appreciate the physical differences, but we fail to appreciate the emotional, the psychological, and the mental differences. So these things are very important. So whenever somebody differs from you, it's important to say, great, you see things differently. With this statement, you're open to the other person. You have taken the sword from his hand. He'll not fight with you. You have affirmed him, but you still haven't agreed or disagreed with the person. So whenever somebody is different from you, please value that. So these are the principles that I was talking to you about, and this is what I would like you to follow. Now, any questions that you have, I'll be happy to answer.
Dr. Meenakshi Davar, the sisters people of World University had taken a conscious decision that questions should be moderated, because the same question is sometimes asked by 2 to 3 persons.
Okay.
So when I was listening to you carefully, I found that 3 questions need your attention.
Okay.
First one, someone asked me from Exeter University, UK, that procrastinators are the leaders of tomorrow. What is your advice to such type of thought process?
Well, I don't think procrastinators are the leaders for tomorrow, because procrastinator is only postponing the problem. I think proactive people who see things coming and work towards it, so they react before the environment, are the ones who would succeed. I don't think procrastinators are the leaders for tomorrow. I wouldn't think so, but I'm open to discuss it nevertheless.
No, since the question was more for advice from an expert like you, so
I wouldn't advise procrastination, because procrastination is only postponing the issue and creating stress for yourself, and it doesn't solve anything. I would much rather that we actually work on the issue, read about it, learn about it, and work towards it. And if we decide to procrastinate something, then it should be a conscious decision. If it's a conscious decision to do it, then it's a quadrant 2 activity, right? But if it is just a procrastination because I can't do anything about it, I don't want to do it, then it's a different situation. I wouldn't advise something that, what analysis leading to paralysis. I wouldn't advise that. Neither would I advise it. So I wouldn't think so. But if it's a conscious decision that I want to tackle this at a certain point, then I would call it planning ahead. I wouldn't call it procrastination.
There is a girl joining me from Assumption University, Thailand. She wants your opinion about the concept of leading from behind.
Leading from behind?
Yeah, is it correct? Not, because she has written to me that you have been in leadership position. You have been well-bred, educated abroad, having doctorate. She wants your opinion whether it is good or not.
Well, I'd like to tell you that I have an army background. I have an armed forces background, and where we were told that it is always leading from front. right? Where you actually face the cannon, that is in the army, where the leader faces the cannon before his people. But as far as our management techniques go in organizations, you got to lead from behind. What I mean is that you kind of delegate and you kind of empower your people, okay, to take on the reins. And then you are there in the background, you're leading from there, you have the path in front of you, but then you let them grow ahead of you and let them move on, right? So that is a way of delegating things, right? So that would be my reaction to that.
Yeah, last question is from someone who is sleeping nicely in the USA, and the question was given to me before, because I don't know how she searched about you, or I don't know, but then she wants to know that I have come to the USA and I'm not getting a job. Should I continue struggling? Will it be showing that I am a courageous girl, or should I come back to India and start searching a job? Will that be a conscious decision? So whatever is your opinion?
I don't think there are any geographical barriers these days. You know, you can look anywhere, and most of the interviews are online. So whether you are in India or you are outside, you would be anyway, doing your job. I mean, is that what the question was?
Yeah, see, I mean, most of these young people wanted advices from you, because you have reached the pinnacle from every point of view. You have seen Indian regimented organization where
I would only I would only tell you, like we're talking of resilience. Okay, so I would only tell you that keep just trying. I mean, keep trying and improve yourself day by day, and move on. And there are no geographical barriers to jobs. So whether you are here or whether you're in the United States, you keep trying and moving on. And I don't think anything should discourage you. The idea is not to feel that I'm useless. The idea is just to feel that probably I'm not the right fit here. I try somewhere else where I'm the right fit.
Good. So, Dr. Meenakshi Davar,
Just because a key doesn't fit in doesn't open the lock, it doesn't mean the key is bad. Okay, maybe there's another lock that it's there to open, right?
That's great. So people want to break for their lunch, and would you be able to join us around 2 for a panel discussion with Professor Rao and you and me? Or will it be too much for you?
I mean, whatever you say. I mean, I'm okay. 2 to what time?
2 to maybe 2:30, 2:45.
Yeah, 2:30. Half an hour is okay. 2 to 2:30.
Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am. So
okay,
please take your lunch. We will assemble again.
Okay.
But before that, I want to make a statement. Your presentation is very lucid. It developed connect with the people, even though it's virtual mode. And I'm happy that people did write to me the questions. At least one person who had not even listened to you. She is sleeping, but she had sent that question to me. Thank you so much. Since you are the chairperson of academics, then as your president, I am indebted to you. See you at 2 after lunch.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Thank you. Okay.